Hey everyone, thank you for joining me today, this evening. Hope you all had a great Tuesday. For those of you watching YouTube, thanks for tuning in. And those of you going to be listening to the podcast, this is going to be aired tomorrow, Wednesday, February 17th. And I'm just going to go over the astrological transit for tomorrow. It's going to be one of three for the year for Saturn Square Uranus. And the one tomorrow isn't going to be so profound. The last two are, however, because there's going to be a lot more going on. Right now, the majority of the planets are kind of situated in Aquarius, where Saturn is, so there isn't a whole lot of aspects other than conjunctions. But the second and third transit with Saturn Square Uranus is going to be a little different. I'll get into and I'll show you the chart that Jamie Partridge of Astrology King was nice enough to post that to astrologyking.com. So definitely check out that site if you want even more insight on it. But all credit to Astrology King for providing that chart there. Um, Saturn Square Uranus. So Saturn is all about restrictions and life lessons and karma. Um, it's in its one of the two home signs. The first home sign is obviously Capricorn, and the second one is Aquarius. So you would think that Saturn and Uranus would be going together well. They don't always do that though, because Uranus is all about freedom, and Saturn's all about restriction, and Uranus is all about freedom and unpredictable behavior and changes, being open, not expecting anything. Um, the influence of Uranus is something that we try to strive for in our spiritual growth. The problem is sometimes the changes can be just too unpredictable, especially when it gets a hard aspect from another major planet. Um, when it's getting a hard aspect from something like Neptune or Pluto, um, the effects aren't really that significant. But I'll show you the second and third transit we're going to have in June and December, and it's going to be making significant aspects to like the moon, and I can't remember the other, but I'll pull up the chart. So this is going to manifest as changes that you don't exactly want, or changes that you don't see with your intuition. And sometimes that can be good, sometimes that can be really challenging and really frustrating. So um, it's going to take patience, a strong mind. Meditation is going to be really important in these upcoming weeks and months. And then as we get closer, the June 14th, the same thing. And then I believe it's December 24th. So Christmas Eve is going to be the third and final Saturn Square Uranus. These are slow moving planets, so the effects are going to be lingering around the whole year. At some point, Saturn's going to be moving backwards, and Uranus just moves really slow. Um, Usually about one sign every 7 to 9 years. So Uranus is its full cycle is going to be about one lifetime. So it does not move fast. Um, some things going on with Uranus making a hard aspect to something like Saturn, political movements, especially for injustice. So movements like Black Lives Matter are only going to gain momentum, and that's certainly a good thing. An organization rising to power that's all about providing justice and equality for people who have been wronged. But also, other things like political instability and other aspects of politics might be prevalent. COVID, a little unpredictability with COVID, whether that will be having the virus kind of diminish because of the vaccine, or it could be that, the mutant strains that they're all talking about now. But it's important not to get too caught up in looking at the astrological forecast and thinking that some horrible strain of COVID is going to knock us all out. It's just a general energy that we're getting from these two planets. I would say more likely it's your day-to-day life that's going to be more affected. So maybe problems with communication in your relationships, problems with communication in maybe not just interpersonal relationships, but your work environment, because Saturn is all about rules. Generally is the ruler of the midheaven. From the basic chart, Saturn is more 10th, 11th house activity, so that's day-to-day relationships, friendships, your career, what you want to accomplish in life. It's a good thing that you're going to be more open-minded, because Uranus is closely related to Aquarius, so that's all about being more open-minded and not trying to restrict any freedom. And going back to the political stance on this, it's also a good thing because of more open-minded views, less restriction of freedom is Uranus generally. Unfortunately, the Saturn Square could put some issues with that. But the influence of Uranus is going to open people's minds to maybe a different philosophy when it comes to those viewpoints. So because Saturn is more about karma and more so doing the right thing, doing something good because it's the right thing to do. And I'm not talking about the misconception with karma. Karma is all about if you do something good will happen to you. That's not what I'm talking about. It's more so doing the right thing because that's the right thing to do. That's more so what karma is. So it's going to be a challenging transit, for most of the year, but it's definitely going to be an influential one where you're going to learn a lot and you're going to grow a lot. So it might be a challenging time, but it's not going to be for nothing. There's going to be lots of growth happening. You just need to follow that Aquarian way and just keep an open mind and really try to grow from the experience. Let me just switch the camera here so you can see the picture. So there's the chart. Zoom in a little bit. As you can see, this is the first one. the one that's going to be happening tomorrow. Uranus is paired with the moon, and Mars is there too, but it's not really a significant influence. And then Saturn is piled up there with a whole bunch of different planets. And sorry if you're listening to the podcast, but as you can see, Saturn is in Aquarius, and as far as transit goes, there's not many close aspects. There's Mercury is 4 degrees away, and it's moving closer to Saturn, but it's going to stop the retrograde cycle in just a few days. So Saturn doesn't have many contacts actually in Aquarius. There's a bunch of planets there, but they're all far enough away where the conjunction isn't really going to be in effect. And let me find, and here's June 14th, 2021. As you can see here, there's two squares. First of all, there's the square from Saturn to Uranus, and then there's the square from Uranus to the moon. Uranus is kind of an enemy of the moon, but it's pretty neutral. A bigger enemy to Uranus would be the sun, and it's not really making an aspect to Uranus. So right here for the second one, it's going to be way more influential, especially with the moon in Leo. So that is the full moon, just the opposite of what we just had, the new moon in Aquarius. This would be equivalent to the full moon, but so it's about 6 months, maybe 4 to 6 months later. So there's definitely going to be unpredictable moods, unpredictable emotions associated with this one. So it just amplifies the Saturn Uranus square even more so. It makes it a little more challenging, and Saturn, of course, is still in Aquarius. Uranus is still in Taurus, but the moon is in Leo. Saturn also is applying a inconjunct or quincunx to Venus in Cancer, and Venus is in Cancer is a good spot, and Saturn in Aquarius is a good spot, but there may be some misunderstandings with relationships, especially romantic relationships, on June 14th, right around that time. It doesn't mean that there's going to be problems. It just means that there could be a little bit miscommunication. But, there is also a sextile from Uranus to Venus. So that's, once again, those aren't really negative planets towards each other. And sextile is always pretty harmonious. So there might be changes in your life as far as relationships, but it could be good. So there are some difficult aspects here, but now there's one positive aspect with the Venus sextile Uranus. So that's a positive thing right there. let me take a look at, so this is the last and final one. Um, and you see the square there. Um, Basically the same thing we had now. The only difference is we got a bunch of planets now in Capricorn, so and they're different planets for sure. Um, you got Pluto, Mercury, and the Sun all in Capricorn, with Saturn in Aquarius and Jupiter now at the very end of Aquarius. So there isn't too much of a powerful influence with 18 degrees. As you see right here, that's 18 degrees apart. There isn't a huge influence. And the North Node is also heading towards Taurus. So that isn't a huge influence. When the North Node changes houses, usually around the same amount of time that Saturn would change houses, except the North Node is usually moving backwards. Occasionally it's stationary or moving forward, but mostly backwards. So you see the retrograde there. Don't worry about that. That planet right there usually moves backwards. So it's nothing new. Um, oh, yeah, so I take it back. I don't really believe that the third Saturn Square Uranus is going to be too challenging. You know, the third time, you know, of the same aspect, you're getting kind of used to it, but it's that repetitive energy after a while sometimes gets to be too much. From what I've noticed personally, is when you have that aspect for 2, 3, 4 times in a year, for aspects that aren't common. So that's not a relatively common aspect, since they're both slow moving planets. So that's a pretty profound effect for 1 year, especially a year that we were hoping was going to be better. We got hit with COVID and a lot of political instability and issues with social justice. So 2020 was kind of a rough year. So this and now 2021 with this aspect, it could be a year of growth. So um, I think there's definitely going to be a lot of positives that come with this when we go back to this. But the second one is definitely going to be the most challenging, because you add the moon in there, and that's going to be even more so profound. So that's just my interpretation of the transit we have going tomorrow. Um, Not too many aspects from this. Um, it's really only the second transit in June will you actually get multiple aspects with the T square. And of course, the T square is when three planets are all squaring each other. And common misconception about a square is that it's negative and nothing comes from it. That's just not true at all. The square is actually pretty beneficial in the long run, especially when it's coming from Saturn. Because Saturn's all about teaching us life lessons, restricting us when we need to be restricted. Sometimes you get to be too open-minded, or relationships are going a little too well. Saturn's there to say, get your head out of the clouds. We need to bring this back a little bit. And so maybe that is the influence from this aspect tomorrow. Of course, it's not just tomorrow. It's going to be a pretty long period of time because both of them move pretty slow. Saturn will do one full cycle around 12 signs in about 29 to 30 years. If you're having your Saturn return right now, so if you're right around 29, 30 years old, these three dates may be even more intense, just as a warning. So those of you late people in your late 20s, be aware of that kind of influence, as well as early 30s. I myself just about 34 years old, so I'm kind of past the Saturn return phase, but definitely had some intense experiences when Saturn does rule Aquarius and Capricorn, and Aquarius is ruled by the ankle and the lower leg. And during my Saturn return, I actually ruptured my Achilles almost completely. Um, and it was a long recovery process, and that's just the Saturn return in a nutshell, right there. So yeah, if you're at that age range, 28 to 32 or so, just be aware that that could possibly happen. Maybe not like an injury or anything like that, but the intensity from that aspect is going to be pretty intense. And you may not have a problem with that. You could be right in the middle of your Saturn return, and you could be unaffected by this aspect. It just depends about other stuff going in your personal chart. And if you are wondering about how to interpret your natal chart, I can always help you with that. You can just find me on social media, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. My Facebook and Instagram is psycheology underscore. So that's PSYCHEOLOGY underscore. And Facebook, you can find my page, Psycheology Heal. I will post the links in on the YouTube video here. If you're listening on my podcast, the links to my profile should be in my profile. So in my Anchor or Spotify profile. So yeah, that's it. Comment if you have anything you want to talk about, whether it be a question, comment on this interpretation. I'm definitely always open to hear from what you guys have to say. All right. Well, thank you for listening, watching, and I will probably be back tomorrow at some point for meditation, and later on Wednesday as well for a meditation. So definitely tune in.